Looking for craft show display ideas? You're in the right place. I'm going to be chatting with my friend Nicole Stevenson all about how to make your craft show booth look great so that you draw more customers into your booth and make more sales. Nicole and I both spent about a decade doing craft shows. I wrote a book all about my experiences and have made more videos on this channel about craft shows. And Nicole is the founder of Dear Handmade Life. She runs a series of craft shows throughout California called Patchwork shows, which she's been doing for about 17 years. She's also the founder of Craftcation Conference, which is an amazing annual event in Ventura, California that I've spoken at a number of times. And we have so much to say about how to make your craft show booth look great. So let's get into it. Hey, Nicole, thanks for joining me about how to make your craft show booth look super awesome.
Thank you for having me, Mallory. I'm excited to talk about this. It's definitely something I feel very passionately about.
Yeah, and so you sold at craft shows for many years. I sold at craft shows for many years, and now you run a whole big series of craft shows in California, right? So you know a lot about what makes a booth look really good and maybe not so good. So maybe do you want to talk about like what are some common mistakes that either you made or you see other people making that like they want to veer away from?
I think the most common mistake is not putting as much effort into your booth as you do into what you're making. It's like I always think about the idea of perceived value when I think about merchandising and craft fair booths, which is that, and this is a perfect example, candles. Okay. So you can buy a candle at the 99-cent store, the dollar store, and you can also buy one of those, Joe Malone or Diptyque candles that are, $50, $60, $100. I don't know. I don't buy those candles, but they're both candles. And I know one is higher quality material than the other one, but also the packaging, makes a huge difference. And also the setting where you're in. When you're buying a candle at the 99-cent store, it's like a tornado just ran through there. Everything's, a total disaster. When you're buying a fancy candle, you're often in a boutique where everything is merchandised just so. So think about that when it comes to your booth display and also your packaging. This is your customer's first impression of your business. And if your business doesn't look professional and trustworthy, how are they going to trust that your product is something that they can trust is going to last or is going to do whatever it is that you say it's going to do? So put that effort into your booth. So just starting there by putting thought and effort into it is a great place to start. It's shocking to me this day and age when I go to a craft fair and I'm walking, down the row and I see someone with a table with no tablecloth or just a black tablecloth and their stuff just set on top of the table, because we have so many resources that are completely free. Back in the day when I was doing craft fairs, it was like, you have to go and look and do this. The internet was barely even a thing. And now you can just Google craft fair display, DIY this, and you have so much information at your fingertips. So first tip and / biggest mistake is not putting care into your merchandising your booth and into your booth design.
Yeah, because like the way your booth looks is an extension of your brand, which is so important. It's like the fundamentals of business. I have a thing called the Badass Creatives Marketing Pyramid, which is kind of a way that I explain like kind of where to start and focus your efforts as a business. And so if you imagine a triangle and it's split into 3 parts, the bottom, the foundation is your brand. And that's part of like your booth display is included in that, your ideal customer, like all of this stuff. That's like the foundation of everything.
Absolutely.
What are some ways that you always recommend to people to like help create that brand and draw people into the booth? So say that you're like walking, the show as a customer or, just experiencing what really draws you into somebody's booth versus another booth.
Absolutely. I think the first thing I would do as a maker is to walk craft shows thinking about booths and just relax, deep breath. You're not there to shop, and just observe, see how customers are interacting with booths that are there and kind of take notes. So that's something that I would suggest. That's your homework if you're watching right now.
I would say too, like not only walking craft show for looking at other people's booths, but even just doing retail stores. Like this all ties in with visual merchandising, right? Like, so I, for a long time, wanted to have a brick and mortar retail store. And I think a lot of the same rules apply, whether you're doing visual merchandising for a retail shop or for a craft show booth, a lot of the same principles. So even going into like Anthropologie is a great example. They have beautiful displays. So if you have a store like an Anthropologie or like an H&M or an Urban Outfitters, those can be great places to kind of go for inspiration about the way that they display different types of products, and maybe you can adapt some inspiration and ideas to your own craft show booth.
While we're talking about this, my one super important tip that I want to make sure that I don't forget to say is so one of the things that I feel revolutionized our booth, I did craft shows as with my handmade business for over a decade. And then the business I have now, Dear Handmade Life, we did a line of t-shirts and pins that are maker inspired. So things say like make all the things and stuff like that. So we would have a booth where we sold that at our craft fairs, and we built a cash wrap. So it was, it's just fairly thin, plywood, and it basically looks like a bar, but it's completely foldable. So there's a piece of wood on the front and then two on the sides. They fold like that. They're on hinges. And then we have a piece that goes on the top. So it folds flat in your car. You can make it any size you want. It doesn't take up any space. Pull it out. All you do is you open up the sides like this and put the piece of wood on top. You can paint it. You can, Cricut or silhouette your logo on it or designs or anything. And it just really offers this like professionalism. Plus it's a place for you to be. And I would definitely recommend doing it at bar height. So you're either standing or sitting on a bar height stool instead of sitting all the way down. That made just a huge difference. Plus there's all the space in there for storage for extra stuff. I think sometimes people forget like where you're going to store your extra stuff, and they'll just have like a bin in the corner of the booth. So just thinking about all of that stuff. And then I feel that if you're doing craft fairs, you should think about customizing your build, so like I'm saying this cash wrap thing, but listen, if you're doing craft fairs, you're a creative person, you can DIY it, and it's very, very inexpensive. So I would think about that rather than, investing a whole bunch of money in like a trade show booth type of a setup. I would really DIY it so you can customize it, to your brand, and also to different size booths you might have. One show you might have a 10 by 10, another you might have an 8 by 10 or a 4 by 6. So thinking about what can be adjustable. And then what I would do is like have a grid paper and, put all of my different things on there so I could see how things were fitting. And then once I felt like, okay, I've got this set up right, I set it up in my backyard, check it out, see, okay, is this comfortable to walk through? Is there a flow here? Do I have the right things in the right places? It's always great if you have, sale items, or, we would always have like misprints. And so we would put those kind of in the front in a bucket to kind of draw people in. And that's the only thing that I ever have like what I would say like messily displayed. I would just have a bucket and it was like half off teas in the bucket. And then they'd be sifting through there and I really like this one. And I'm like, well, we have that one here that doesn't have a little piece of ink here, so it's just a great way to kind of get people in. The other thing is we started implementing more DIY stuff at our shows, and we actually offer our vendors a discount on their booth if they offer some type of a DIY in their booth. And it can be very simple. One of my favorite ones is a kids coloring station, and somebody literally just had like a tiny little round table from IKEA and two little kids chairs at the front of their booth, and it said kids coloring station, and they had a jar of crayons and some printed out, pages. Oh my gosh, the kids walk in there, then their mom or dad is in there looking at your stuff. Or it gives, while the parents are shopping, it gives their kids an opportunity to be engaged and do something rather than like pulling on their parents, pants or dress and trying to drag them out of there. So having some type of a craft thing there, especially geared towards kids, is a great way to not only draw people in, but to keep people in.
Yeah, there's so many good things that I want to touch on that you said, and so many things that also still tie into like retail. So I worked in retail for a really long time in addition to doing craft shows, and like having something for the people who aren't actively shopping to do, like in this example, the kids, or I worked in women's clothing and worked in lingerie stores and stuff for a long time. So you always want to have seating for maybe there's the husband or the family members who are coming, who are actively shopping. Like in a store, you might not have room for that in a booth, but just having something else for those other people to do. Having those sort of lower priced, lower ticket items right at the front to bring people in. I feel like retail shops do this a lot of times too, right? They'll have a discount rack outside of the store to sort of let people know this is a store, come in and buy stuff, right? And then the thing about having your cash wrap or your area for actually kind of your operations. This is something I talk about in another one of my videos, my 5 craft show must haves. So one of the things that took me a really long time to realize was having that eye level seating. So I found this really great sort of tall director's chair that I would sit in, or I would stand. But sometimes if you're an 8-hour show, you don't want to be standing for that entire 8 hours. You need to be able to sit. But having something that will kind of put you at that eye level so that you can actually communicate with people and catch their eye and stuff, so important.
Yeah, when you mentioned, having the sale items or like lower priced items at the front, it made me think about something else too. Is at that cash wrap where people are checking out. That's where you have your pins, your buttons, like just some like a little display of add-ons for them while they're there, because as they're waiting for you to ring them up, do whatever you're doing, they're looking like, oh, can you throw this in? It's so much easier once your credit card or your Apple Pay, is already out and you're in process to add something on, especially if it's a lower priced item. And I always do a twofer. So like if our pins are $10, they're $10 or 2 for 18 or 2 for 16 or whatever the case may be. It's rare that I'll do a sale on something unless it's damaged. I much prefer to do a twofer. It makes it worth it, basically.
Same. I did this back when I was doing craft shows. I had a lot of these earrings that were really the cost for me to make them was really low, so I had a really high profit margin. And so I would have this display of earrings, and it was $12 each or 2 for 20. And those 2 for 20 earrings a lot of times would pay my booth fee, right? Like, it's so important.
I believe it.
So you mentioned like some DIY and getting really crafty and creative with booth displays. I know I had certain things that I did back when I was running shows. I would love to hear like some of the examples of what you've seen people do. Some of the things that I did back in the day was I had an old vintage suitcase that I modified and sort of sewed some ribbons into where it would like stay open so I could have greeting cards for sale, little like smaller things, and then kind of hang some display greeting cards up at the back of it. Or I turned some window shutters, put some like braces on the back where they would stand up tall, and then I would hang earrings, like dangle earrings from those window shutters. What are some cool things that you've seen makers and artists or that you've made as far as like DIY displays?
We just made, we do a conference every year called Craftcation, and it's a conference for creatives where we have business classes and craft classes. And we also have a pop-up shop in there. And I mentioned earlier that, I design t-shirts and stuff like that. One of the things that we make are, little enamel pins and stickers. And then we just started doing patches, and we really only sell this stuff at the Craftcation pop-up shop. And so the year before last, they were kind of like on the table sitting in bowls, but at different heights. And this year I bought, and it was shockingly inexpensive. I could have made it myself, but it was cheaper to buy it, unfortunately, is like a room divider, right? So a 4-paneled room divider, but it was pegboard on in there. So then I grabbed that. Again, it's wood. You can paint it any color you want. You could paint, huge rainbow, whatever. We left ours white. And then I just ordered the clear, plastic things that fit into the peg holes, because it's like a standard peg hole thing. And they were mostly business card holders that I could put our stickers and our patches and and then those little hooks that I just slid our, pins in their little containers onto. And it was awesome, especially like we took it apart in the center, the hinges in the center. So then we created 2 off. I mean, it was just really super versatile. And that's one of the things that I kind of keep in mind is having versatile pieces. So we created another one when we were selling our stuff at our shows. And it was a very specific display. I mean, it was plain wood. And then there was a dowel here, and it was perfect for a t-shirt to hang. And then next to it went this, and this. And once I was kind of done doing that, it was there was nothing else I could do with it. Whereas this pegboard thing has no matter what what I'm selling, I could put stuff on there. So kind of thinking about that. I think the other thing is like thinking about the things that you make and your brand and what's behind it and your why, and seeing if there's something that fits in there. Like we have this one maker who does jewelry, and it's made partially out of parts of bicycle tires. So she has a, old bicycle wheel that she has earrings, like on the spokes hanging off of. So just kind of thinking about it in that way, like how can I bring my branding into my display? Yeah. So I think just taking some time and thinking about that part, and then also finding a way to show your process in some way. It's not always possible, especially if you're like a ceramicist. You're not going to bring your ceramic studio down. It's a lot easier if you're a jeweler to sit there and bead at a show. But even if you're like a painter, just having some of your old paintbrushes in a jar on your cash wrap so people can see, and like bringing those bits of your studio and your process in. I've seen some makers who will have an iPad set up with a video of their process. The one I'm thinking about, they did like glass blowing. So it was like them in their studio making these glass pieces. And it was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea this was how much went into this. So finding a way to bring your guests into your process and remind them that you are making this, or you are designing that this is a special thing. It's not something that you're just picking up at any old store. Big box store is what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that you said that made me think of other aspects of this. One, you were talking about the versatility, which is so important. I think two, when you're thinking about the displays, especially if they're bigger things, thinking about the transportability, because you're going to have to haul this stuff to and from your house or whatever, your studio, to the show. And then also kind of showing that behind the scenes, or like how you're making it. I think some other options I've seen people do. I have friends, Gwen and Brian, who run a t-shirt company. They do like horror themed HP Lovecraft stuff. They've done things like horror conventions. They don't really do craft shows, but they do other kind of events. But one thing that they've done is have some really nice vertical printed banners with photos of people wearing their shirts. And I think that you could do that too. Say that you're a ceramicist and you can't really like do that. You could have photos of you in your studio, and that hangs behind you at a booth. And those levels, like having stuff at like higher level as a backdrop, can also help pull people in.
Definitely, definitely. I love that idea of, you could even like blow up a photo, and it's almost like a backdrop, for behind your booth.
Yeah. Nicole, since you are a craft fair organizer, I would also love to talk a little bit about some of the considerations, because I know some events, like back when I was doing craft shows, they might require certain things that are part of your display that people need to consider. Like some events I know would do, like, you have to have a white canopy. That is sometimes a requirement. Sometimes they require a certain amount of weights for tents so that things don't blow away for safety reasons. Are there any things like that that are common considerations that people should account for with displays?
Yeah, our show doesn't have any requirements like that, but I definitely think having a white tent, not only, there's no craft fair that's going to say everybody has to have a red tent. If they're going to have a specification, it's going to be a white tent. So you might as well get a white one. The other reason to get a white one is because the other colors like change the ambiance and the color of your stuff that's in the booth. Like, I don't know if you've ever walked into, somebody who had like a red tent, but it changes everything, the feel. And that might be what you're going for, especially like your horror people, like that would be an example where that would work with their brand. So I would say, if you're going to get a tent, make it a white one. I do think it's smart to invest the money in getting a good tent. I am a huge fan of Easy Up, that brand. We've been using them in my family my whole life. But, that was what we would take to the river, and that was just our backyard tent, was an Easy Up. And they, depending on which one you get, they can be a little more expensive, but you can also get replacement parts and everything. Definitely having some kind of weights. What I recommend is I get these sandbags, and I get them off Amazon, and they Velcro onto your legs. But instead of filling them with sand, I fill them with bottles of water, like small bottles of water. And then I use those bottles throughout. When I'm done with them from the season, because they've been sitting out in the sun, I don't really want to drink them. They go to my plants, so having that, I've never really used the tent walls, but I have seen vendors who use those, especially if you're in bad weather. That can be helpful. And then just making sure that your displays are as sturdy as possible, because at this point, all of our shows are outdoors, and wind is probably the biggest factor. And so if you have your tent weighted down, think about your displays too. If your tent's still standing and your displays have fallen over, that might not work out. So for example, when I was talking about that folding screen, just putting a hinge on the back, with a piece of wood that goes to the floor, and then dropping a sandbag on there can make a huge difference in having to pick up all of your stuff after the wind knocks it over.
Absolutely. That's the kind of stuff that you learn the hard way. I learned all of those things the very hard way.
Same. Very much same.
Well, for people who want to learn more about Patchwork Show or Craftcation Conference or any of the other things that you offer, because you offer so many resources for artists and makers, where can they find you?
You can find me at dearhandmadelife.com. So that's dear like you're writing a letter, and handmade and then life.com. And that can take you anywhere you need. We're also on Instagram at Dear Handmade Life and the Patchwork Show. And we just started an Instagram for Craftcation. That's Craftcation Conference. So hope to see you somewhere on the gram, and feel free to send me a message and tell me that you found out about us here.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Nicole.
Thank you, Mallory.